The Galactic Empire was a towering colossus that spanned countless star systems, a monolithic force built on conquest and control. For centuries, it reigned unchallenged, its soldiers enforcing its will with ruthless efficiency. To them, humans were an anomaly, neither particularly advanced nor resource-rich, a species relegated to the peripheries of galactic relevance. Yet it was in one such remote colony, nestled on the verdant moon of Calder 7, that an event would unravel the Empire's iron grip. Eirik Longard, a bright-eyed boy of 12, darted through the lush, sun-dappled forest that surrounded his family's settlement. His laughter rang out as he chased his pet drone, a playful orb of flickering lights that zipped through the trees. To the settlers, Calder 7 was a sanctuary, far from the chaos of galactic politics. For Eirik, it was home, a place of simple joys and the boundless curiosity of youth. His mother, Astrid, watched from the porch of their modest home, her sharp eyes softened by maternal pride. "Eirik, don't stray too far," she called, her voice carrying a note of gentle warning. Eirik waved back, his grin as radiant as the twin suns above. But the tranquility of Calder 7 shattered with the roar of descending starships. The settlers looked up to see the gleaming vessels of the Galactic Empire blotting out the sky. Panic rippled through the community as armored soldiers disembarked, their formation precise and menacing. The Empire had come, not for war, but for domination. They demanded allegiance, resources, and compliance. Eirik, oblivious to the danger, ran toward the commotion, his drone buzzing behind him. Astrid's heart seized with fear as she dashed after her son. The settlers had no weapons, no defenses. They were farmers, engineers, and dreamers, not warriors. A desperate negotiation unfolded between the colony's leader and the Empire's commander, a cold, calculating officer named Vexer Oren. But misunderstandings escalated. When a frightened settler accidentally discharged a crude plasma tool, the Empire's soldiers responded with unrelenting force. The massacre was swift and brutal. Blaster fire illuminated the settlement as men, women, and children fell in the chaos. Astrid reached Eirik just as a soldier's weapon discharged. She shielded her son with her body, but the energy blast tore through them both. Eirik's small frame went limp in her arms, his wide eyes staring at the sky. Astrid's trembling hand caressed his face as her life ebbed away. By the time the Empire's forces departed, the settlement was a smoldering ruin. Survivors were few, their cries swallowed by the silence of loss. Among the dead lay Eirik Longard, his drone flickering weakly beside him. Far across the galaxy, aboard the warship Mjolnir's Wrath, a message reached Ragnar Longard. The ship's interior was a stark contrast to the sterile uniformity of the Empire's vessels. Its walls bore intricate carvings of Norse myths, illuminated by the warm glow of bioluminescent runes. Ragnar, a towering figure with braided hair and piercing eyes, was immersed in strategy when the holographic message played. The courier's voice was hesitant, laden with sorrow. "Ragnar, the colony on Calder 7, they're gone. Eirik is gone." For a moment, the room was silent. Ragnar's allies, a motley crew of hardened warriors and renegades, watched as their leader's expression hardened into a mask of grief and fury. He gripped the edge of the table, his knuckles white as a low growl escaped his lips. "He was my son," Ragnar whispered, his voice trembling with restrained rage. "My blood. They will pay." The crew exchanged uneasy glances. They had seen Ragnar in battle, a force of nature who struck fear into the hearts of his enemies. But this was different. This was personal. One of his closest allies, a grizzled alien named Skor, placed a hand on Ragnar's shoulder. "What's the plan, old friend?" Ragnar's eyes burned with resolve. "The Empire thinks us weak. They will learn what it means to awaken a Viking's wrath." As the Mjolnir's Wrath prepared for war, Ragnar stood before the ship's viewing deck, staring into the infinite expanse of stars. His mind replayed memories of Eirik, his laughter, his boundless curiosity, and the dreams he would never fulfill. The grief was a storm raging within him, but it forged his resolve into something unbreakable. "Eirik," he murmured, "your death will not be in vain. I swear it." The stars seemed to shimmer in response, as if bearing witness to the oath of a father who would bring the Empire to its knees. The first chapter of vengeance had been written, and the galaxy was about to learn the cost of underestimating humanity. The Mjolnir's wrath cut through the void like an ancient blade reforged in fire, its engines trailing a blue glow as it sailed toward vengeance. Ragnar Longard stood at the command deck, his imposing figure framed by the ship's panoramic viewport, the endless expanse of stars reflected in his piercing eyes. But his thoughts were anchored to the face of his son. The weight of loss bore down on him, not as a burden, but as fuel for the fire in his soul. He would not mourn in silence. His grief would speak in fire and blood. "Report," Ragnar growled, his voice low and gravelly, carrying the authority of a man who had weathered countless battles. Skor, his trusted second-in-command, stepped forward. The alien's reptilian features twisted into a grim expression. "The Empire has fortified their border outposts, anticipating retaliation. They underestimate your resolve, but their numbers are significant." Ragnar's lips curled into a fierce smirk. "Their numbers mean nothing if their hearts are weak. Prepare the crew. Tonight, we remind the stars what it means to cross a Viking." The Mjolnir's wrath was no ordinary vessel. Forged in the fiery heart of an asteroid belt and enhanced with salvaged alien technology, it was both a fortress and a weapon. Its hull bore intricate carvings of Norse runes, glowing faintly as if alive with ancient power. Each corner of the ship was a testament to its crew's defiance. Patchworks of human ingenuity and alien craftsmanship melded into a single, deadly entity. Ragnar gathered his crew in the war room, a circular chamber dominated by a holographic display of the Empire's closest outpost. Around him stood a diverse assembly of warriors, mercenaries, and outlaws, each loyal not to a flag, but to Ragnar himself. There was Sigrid, the ship's navigator, a wiry woman with cybernetic implants that glowed faintly under her skin. She was an unparalleled pilot, her hands moving across controls with the precision of a dancer. Beside her stood Karan, a towering alien with chitinous armor and a booming voice, who served as the muscle of the crew. And then there was Freya, a sharp-eyed marksman who rarely spoke, but whose aim was as unerring as her loyalty. "The outpost is lightly staffed," Freya began, her voice cutting through the tension. "They don't expect anyone to strike so soon. We hit fast, take what we need, and leave them scattered." Ragnar nodded, his gaze sweeping across the room. "This isn't just about revenge. This is about sending a message. They took from us what can never be returned. Now, we'll take from them everything they hold dear." The crew roared their agreement, the air thrumming with the promise of retribution. The Mjolnir's wrath emerged from hyperspace, just beyond the Empire outpost, its sleek frame cloaked in the darkness of the void. Ragnar stood at the helm, his hand gripping the armrest of his chair as he gave the command. "Begin the assault." The ship surged forward, its weapons roaring to life. Plasma cannons unleashed volleys of energy, striking the outpost's shields with relentless fury. The Empire's defensive turrets retaliated, but they were no match for Ragnar's precision. Guided missiles slipped through the cracks in their armor, turning their hangars into blazing infernos. Amidst the chaos, Ragnar led the boarding party, his axe gleaming with a plasma edge. The weapon, a fusion of ancient design and modern technology, was a symbol of his unyielding spirit. As the boarding craft pierced the outpost's hull, Ragnar's crew spilled into the corridors like a flood unleashed. The Empire's soldiers scrambled to respond, but Ragnar was relentless. He moved with the ferocity of a storm, each swing of his axe leaving devastation in its wake. His crew followed suit, their coordinated attacks overwhelming the defenders. Skor fought beside him, his massive frame deflecting blaster fire as he wielded a hammer that crackled with electricity. Freya picked off enemies from a distance, her shots precise and deadly. Even Sigrid joined the fray, her agility allowing her to weave through the chaos, disabling enemy systems with calculated efficiency. The battle was swift, the Empire's forces crumbling under the onslaught. Ragnar and his crew reached the command center, where the outpost officer, a trembling human, begged for mercy. "Please, we didn't know who the boy was. We were following orders," the officer stammered, his hands raised in surrender. Ragnar's eyes burned with unrelenting fury. "And what did your order say about mercy? About innocence?" The officer's pleas died in his throat as Ragnar's axe descended. The outpost lay in ruins, its once imposing structure reduced to smoldering wreckage. As Ragnar and his crew returned to the Mjolnir's Wrath, the survivors of the attack broadcast desperate messages to the Empire. The name Ragnar Longard echoed through their channels, a name that would soon become synonymous with terror. In the war room, Skor turned to Ragnar. "What next, old friend?" Ragnar stared at the holographic map, his gaze fixed on the Empire's central command. This was just the beginning. They'll come for us now, but they'll find more than they bargained for. We're not just fighting for revenge. We're fighting to show them the strength of humanity. The crew's cheers reverberated through the ship, a sound that carried the promise of war. Ragnar's grief had become a weapon, his fury a rallying cry. The stars ahead shimmered with potential, their light guiding the Mjolnir's Wrath toward its next target. The galaxy was vast, but Ragnar's vengeance burned brighter than any star. The battle for Kaldr 7 was only the beginning. Ragnar Longard's vengeance had torn through the Empire's outer defenses, but the heart of their power remained untouched, an intimidating fortress of authority. The Mjolnir's Wrath sailed deeper into enemy territory, its crew steeled for the inevitable. The Galactic Empire's vast, calculated response would come soon, but Ragnar had already made his plans. They were no longer simply raiding outposts. They were setting the stage for an assault on the Empire's very core. Ragnar stood at the helm of his ship, his gaze fixed on the distant looming structure of the Empire's capital ship, the Dominance, a behemoth of metal and power. It was a symbol of the Empire's might, a floating citadel that governed the lives of billions. His lips curled into a grim smile as the ship's command center illuminated. He was ready for what came next. Skor's voice broke the silence, a gravelly whisper of concern. "We're within their sensor range, Ragnar. The Dominants will have detected us by now." Ragnar nodded, eyes burning with determination. "Let them come. We'll give them a fight they'll never forget." The Empire's response was swift. Battle cruisers and fighter wings, previously cloaked in the shadows of hyperspace, decloaked in a flurry of blinding light, flanking the Mjolnir's Wrath from all directions. Ragnar's crew went silent, every member preparing for the clash that would define their lives. Freya, poised at her station, spoke with quiet confidence. "I'll clear the skies, but don't expect them to be pushovers." Ragnar met her gaze and nodded, his hand tightening on the control panel. "Then we'll fight until there's nothing left but us." The first wave of Empire fighters swept in like a deadly swarm, their blasters crackling with energy. The Mjolnir's Wrath rocked under the barrage, but Sigurd's steady hands danced across the controls, evading strikes with practiced precision. "Hold steady," she shouted, her voice fierce. "I'll take us in close." The ship surged forward, missiles streaking from its bow and cutting through the enemy ranks. Explosions rocked the void as the Empire's fighters were torn apart. But the Dominance loomed ahead, its shields pulsing with unwavering strength. Ragnar's eyes never left the massive capital ship. "Prepare for the boarding. We end this now." The Mjolnir's Wrath maneuvered into position, just within range to breach the Dominance's hull. The crew launched their boarding pods, dark, jagged shapes that streaked through space, aimed directly at the heart of the Empire's vessel. Inside those pods, Ragnar's crew was ready, each one prepared to face death to see this mission through. "Activate the jamming field." Skor barked, and the ship systems hummed as the cloaking mechanism disabled the Empire's communications and sensor systems, sending the dominants into a temporary state of confusion. But the Empire was not without its strengths. As the boarding pods connected, their hatches exploded open to reveal the Empire's elite forces. Armored soldiers with shimmering energy rifles stood in a perfect defensive formation, blocking the narrow corridors of the dominants. Without hesitation, Ragnar and his crew charged forward, weapons raised, cutting down the Empire's defenders with brutal efficiency. Ragnar was a whirlwind of fury, his plasma axe cleaving through soldiers with a primal roar. Score crushed men beneath his fists, while Frey's shots rang out, each one striking true. The Mjolnir's Wrath crew was a perfect storm, relentless, unstoppable. Yet the deeper they went into the heart of the ship, the more they encountered resistance. Empire soldiers flooded the corridors, and the air grew thick with the hum of blaster fire and the clash of steel. Ragnar's crew pressed on, the weight of their mission propelling them forward. They couldn't afford to falter. Finally, they reached the control center, where the high-ranking officer overseeing the Empire's operations stood, a tall, cold-eyed man in a sharp uniform. His name was Admiral Vexor Orin, the same officer who had led the massacre on Calder 7. His eyes widened as Ragnar stepped forward, bloody but unbowed. "You," Orin spat, his voice laced with disbelief. "You're the savage who killed my soldiers." The son of a Viking turned into a shadow of his former self. Ragnar's voice was low and steady, filled with a depth of fury that made Orin's insides twist. "You killed my son, and now I am here to burn your empire to the ground." Orin's lips twisted into a smirk. "You think you're the first to challenge the Empire? We have crushed entire civilizations. You are nothing." The two men locked eyes, the tension palpable. And then the air shattered as Ragnar lunged forward, his plasma axe cutting through the air with the precision of a strike of lightning. The duel was fierce, Ragnar's primal power clashing against Orin's tactical brilliance. But it was clear, Ragnar was a force of nature, and Orin was a cog in an empire built on fear, not strength. With a single mighty swing, Ragnar cleaved Orin's weapon in two, knocking him to the ground. His axe hovered inches from Orin's throat. "You should have known better than to cross a Viking," Ragnar said, his voice cold as ice. The Admiral's face twisted in pain and fear, but he said nothing. Ragnar didn't need words. The blade descended, ending Orin's life in an instant. His death sent a tremor of fear through the remaining Empire forces, who faltered in their retreat. Ragnar stood over the fallen Admiral, his chest heaving with the weight of victory. The Empire had underestimated him. They had underestimated humanity. The Mjolnir's Wrath had taken the capital ship. The Empire was reeling from a blow it would not soon recover from. As the ship sailed through the wreckage, Ragnar spoke, his voice echoing through the calm system. "Let this be a lesson to the galaxy," he said, his words filled with a quiet rage. "You killed my son. Now, you will witness the vengeance of humanity." With the destruction of the dominants, the galaxy had been forever changed. The Empire's downfall was imminent, and Ragnar had lit the spark that would burn it to the ground. As the Mjolnir's Wrath sailed into the stars, Ragnar stood on the deck, looking out at the expanse before him. His vengeance had been fulfilled, but the journey was far from over. The galaxy was vast, and humanity had just begun to make its mark.